never judged for her choices. It's framed as exclusively a good thing by the episode. It's just pretty straightforwardly saying it's rad to kill this guy. And I love that. That's wonderful. I think the episode as a whole is about this feeling of disposability, not entirely unlike Beyond the Sea, though infinitely better. Nita, a British Indian woman living in the 70s, occupies a world that is actively hostile to her existence, that sees her as an outsider, places her at the bottom.
I understand you're in the habit of eating your lunch in the stockroom. Oh, fine, everybody does it, we don't mind. But it's what you're eating. You see, most people's food, normal food, it doesn't tend to linger.
She is essentially asked by this demon to be part of that system. Just kill 3 people, it's worth it for the greater good necessary to save the world. Treat their lives as disposable in the same way you are treated as disposable. But she refuses. In the end, the only man she is willing to kill is the one who upholds this perverse logic. She fails at this task, the world ends, it's hard to kill fascists, but there's something redemptive in her failure. As she walks away from the earth with her demon lover, I feel the episode is suggesting that perhaps the world as we know it must end. That metaphorical hellfire is a justified response to an apathetic and bigoted society. And that's some out there provocative shit, right? I'm impressed by Charlie Brooker's willingness to go that far, especially considering how unpointed and dull the rest of the season is. So let's talk about Maisie Day, one of the stupidest episodes I've ever seen of anything in my life. Truly bottom of the barrel Black Mirror, in my opinion. It's about a paparazza, Bo, who spends the entire episode trying to take a picture of a celebrity, Maisie Day. The story crawls at a snail's pace as you watch a woman you don't care about chase after another woman you don't care about. It's self-indulgent, but indulgent of what, I cannot say. The whole episode feels like it's leading up to some kind of twist. You know, what's the nature of the celebrity they want a picture of? What happened to her? But the conclusion here is just another nasty spit in my face. She's a werewolf. She is a werewolf lady. That's the twist, if you want to call it that. The woman is a werewolf. So I genuinely believe that the point of this episode is to be as dumb as humanly possible. As you step into it, you might think it will be about voyeurism and the paparazzi, that it will have something to say about media and the way we consume other people's lives as entertainment.
Can I talk to you? You're the agency? I can pay for those pictures. $500? You're killing me.
After all, the first season episode White Bear was about these themes, and it was great. But this episode is not like that. The whole thing has nothing to say besides, I guess, the completely lifeless theme that the paparazzi are bad, and it culminates in the completely meaningless twist that there's a werewolf. And maybe I would be impressed by that. I don't mind meaningless entertainment, but this isn't entertaining. It's bad and it's boring, and I hate it. Also, let me talk about the ending. After Bo finds Maisie, the wolf celeb starts crying about how she wants to die because of her wolf pains. But then Bo hands her a gun, and Maisie urges her to take a sweet pic before shooting herself. Now, I can understand why Bo ended up taking this picture. She's a merciless paparazza, and any sense of compassion she might have doesn't really mean anything in the end. That makes sense. But why is Maisie cool with it? Why does she encourage the picture? What human in a million years would ever act like this? And what aspect of her character suggests that it would be her reaction? There is no answer to any of these questions. The ending is just a meaningless, pointless twist of the knife. It's a terrible conclusion to a terrible episode. And while I think there may be wiggle room on some of the other episodes, I will not respect the Maisie Day apologist in my comment section. The episode is bad. Oh, how nice it is to be at the old stone wall. Anyway, let's talk about a good episode of the 6th season of Black Mirror. Joan is awful. The episode is about a woman, Joan, who finds that her life is being procedurally made into a television show by an AI, and she has to figure out how to stop all that from happening. I like Joan is awful. It's genuinely funny and well acted, and I think surprisingly clever. The episode is, at every level, concerned with the concept of authorship. In a literal sense, it worries about who gets to author which works. What kinds of information should technology have access to, and what kinds of media should it get to create with that access? On a figurative level, it's worried about the authorship we have over our lives. Are we losing something of ourselves, our agency, to the algorithms that shape us?
So maybe now, do you feel...
Yeah, like the main character in my own life? Yeah, I think I do.
This all works, I think. It's a simple theme, but it's told elegantly. The thing about Joan is awful, though, what you could call either its best or its worst quality, is that when you watch it, it kind of feels empty. Like it's not really trying to say much of anything. And this is largely because so much of the episode makes so little sense, because it seems to obey a meaningless cartoon logic. There is, for example, no way that the terms of service on your iPhone contract could possibly legally allow Apple to make an AI-generated show of your life.
They're using me, so...
And you assign them the right to exploit all that.
What? When?
Terms and conditions.
It's literally the logic of an episode of South Park.
Their lips will be removed, and they will be sewn together, mouth to anus.
What?
You agreed to this, mouth to anus, so that the feces from the gastral tract from one will enter the mouth of the little boy, and he agreed this was okay.
Yet it's treated here as such a solid, binding contract that there's no reason why anyone would want to take it to court. There is no public outcry to this streaming service stealing someone's life to make a TV show, where in the real world there would be 1,000 breathless think pieces about it. People would be very mad. And then there's just the stuff that feels silly. The entire episode is played almost exclusively for laughs, and there's a gag in the middle where the protagonist takes a shit in a church to get the show to stop. And this scheme just makes no sense on its face, right? I don't dislike any of this stuff, and I'm not trying to point out plot holes or whatever. The episode is knowingly goofy and surreal, and that's fine. It is funny. But part of me can't help but wish for more from it. The concept of the episode is clever. I like the way it plays with AI. I like the idea of a procedurally generated reality show. But in the end, none of it feels meaty or substantial. It doesn't have that intense Black Mirror sensibility that got me interested in the show years ago. Here's the thing. If I saw this episode in isolation, I would think it was quite good. But for me, it comes to represent something we've come to see over and over in this video. Black Mirror doesn't feel like it cares anymore. It doesn't feel like it wants to be insightful or clever. It doesn't feel interested in pursuing its own ideas. And sometimes that works, as is the case for this episode, but usually it sucks. Usually it makes for boring, safe-feeling TV. Okay. Welcome to the afterlife. Just kidding, you're not dead, but you absolutely could be soon if you don't buy my streaming service Nebula for less than $15 a month. Every month for the foreseeable future, I'll be releasing a little bonus video on Nebula. I have a bunch up already, and for this month, I'm gonna release a video about some Anna Kasparian Voss-related internet discourse that I just thought was interesting. The video is less dramatic than it sounds, though, honestly. I wouldn't get your drama hopes up. Anyway, there's more on Nebula than just me, of course. Lindsay Ellis exclusively releases videos on there, which is super fun. PhilosophyTube has her play and an exclusive documentary on there. Jacob Geller makes commentary videos for the platform. You know, lots of good stuff. Also, while you can get the pleb deal, Nebula, for $15 a month, starting today, you can also get a lifetime subscription for $300. I know what you're thinking. That seems like a lot of money, but that's just your lack of grind set speaking, and I won't elaborate further. But for real, any kind of subscription to Nebula for the year or for your life is a great way to support the channel, and I think a lot of people are happy with what they get. If you're interested, check out the link in the description. So that's the end of the video. That's all I had to say about anything. I hope you liked it. It was a fun video for me to make. And if you did like it, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and give me money on Patreon if you like. That's the other way to access my bonus videos. On that note, now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. Mo asks, have you ever thought about writing a book? Every day of my life I think about writing a book.
The most influential and popular piece of content about Linux, in my humble opinion, is called Linux Sucks. You probably heard of it. It started as a talk in 2009 given by tech journalist Brian Lunduk at the Linux Fest Northwest, and behind the obviously troll-ish title we have a genuinely interesting compilation of, yes, all the achievement of the Linux community, but also all the issue that the community still had to work on. It talks about audio problems, Wi-Fi issues, updates breaking core functionalities, and so on. The talk was so popular that Lunduk has had almost one every year since then, and in 2016 he even had Richard Stallman as a guest, along with the then Red Hat CEO. However, in 2017 he decided to do the very last Linux Sucks show at the Southern California Linux Expo. He told the audience, as well as the event organizer, that this year was the very last for Linux Sucks. Next year he said psych and still went on. In 2020 he stopped doing them in front of a live audience for obvious reasons, but he kept recording and is still working on them. In fact, there's one live streaming at the exact time this video comes out. However, something changed since then. Linux Sucks never went back to being recorded live, and the tone of the video significantly changed. The 2021 edition is titled The End of Linux is Night.
This year, we're only going to be talking about something that is very sad, that the end of Linux is indeed at hand. Now, I'm not talking about today, not even tomorrow, but the beginning of the end of Linux has already happened, and I'm going to show you in point ways, I almost pronounced that correctly, exactly why Linux is just about to end. And I want to be clear about something here. When I say the end of Linux is nigh, this is not some inflammatory statement.
He switches from poking fun to Linux issues to claiming that the core idea of Linux itself is under attack. He talks about an attack to the leaderships of Linux, Richard Stallman being kicked out of the Free Software Foundation, Eric Raymond being banned from the Open Source Initiative, and even Linus Torvalds would be at risk. He says that at Linux conferences, the audience is no longer made of nerd neckbeards, and there are business and PR people instead. And even worse, there aren't really any community conferences being organized anymore at all, and we can't go around and talk to each other anymore. He talks about Linux kernel development being too fast to be sustained, with too many features being added. His own summary of the Linux situation is founders banished, community in shambles, companies losing Linux focus, Google building a replacement, statistically unlikely to stay active much longer. This video is usually finished on a positive note and encouraging one. Not anymore. Linux Sucks, The End is Night is extremely serious. Next year, similar story. He attacks Canonical for snaps and for killing hopes and dreams, and he attacks the Linux Foundation itself for spending more on vaccine passports than on the Linux kernel. And he makes fun of OpenSUSE for receiving an award about COVID-19 safety for employees and women in tech initiatives from a charity that they donated to. And honestly, some of these things are quite easy to agree with. Take snaps. Okay, I don't like them, especially because they are proprietary on the server side, something that I feel goes against the idea of Linux. Some other things are a bit more debatable. Let's briefly focus on the attack of Linux leadership argument, since it's a pretty important one. Are we under attack? So let's start with Eric Raymond from the Open Source Initiative. He was actually kicked away from their mailing list because he violated the code of conduct by being rude and aggressive. He replied to the ban by creating a webpage called The Right to be Rude, claiming that we have to embrace the right to be rude, not because rude in itself is a good thing, but because the degenerative slide into suppression of disfavored opinions has to be stopped right where it starts, at the tone policing. Or, to rephrase it, he should be allowed to be as rude and as aggressive as he wants without consequences, because the alternative, tone policing, is a slide into suppression of disfavored opinions. Okay, take Stallman. There are multiple reports of Stallman harassment and uncomfortable behavior, such as handling out pleasure cards, offering tender embraces, and he has a history of extremely inappropriate claims, such as the idea that children can consent to having sexual relationships. He did take that back, but only partially so. The reason behind his resignation from the FSF board was that he claimed that the children at the Epstein Island probably presented themselves as entirely willing, and thus using the term sexual assault for those who did have sex with them would be unjust. As Drew DeVault notes, Stallman seems to have no understanding of the role of power dynamics in sexual harassment, assault, and rape. There's more example, by the way, on his article. I don't think that his removal from the board has to be seen as an attack towards Linux ideals. Rather, it's proof that our sensibilities around the topics of sexual harassment and violence changed over the years, while Stallman hasn't. Either way, he joined back the FSF board a couple of years later anyway, so crisis averted. Regarding Torvalds, he took a hiatus in 2018 to work on improving himself by learning how to better understand people's emotions and respond appropriately. He came back, everything is fine, there's no visible attack on his role in Linux. Other statements, when similarly analyzed, are unconvincing. He says that Google will replace Linux with Fuchsia, their own kernel, something that even years later isn't even close to happening. That kernel only shipped in one product, the Nest Hub. Or Linux will end soon because it has had an unusually long run compared to other kernels and is thus statistically likely to die off. You can check out this very nice thread on Twitter by the embedded Linux kernel developer Caleb Connolly, who summarizes the whole thing as, here we have 44 minutes of baseless claims and fear tactics designed to chase clout and defend bigots. And even if you agree with Lunduk, there's still the question of what happened? Like, why did the style, the tone of voice so suddenly change? Well, I believe we have to take a deep dive into the author himself, Brian Lunduk, to truly know why.
Betty Botter bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. But a bit of better butter will make my batter better. So she bought a bit of butter better than her bitter butter, and she put it in her batter, and the batter was not bitter. So 'twas better, Betty Botter bought a better butter. Ah, goddamn.